All right, everybody. I see that everybody's filing in, and I just again want to thank everybody for joining us today for our August Pathways to Employment. This one is going to be a special one, and I'm really glad that you all have joined us. Again, my name is Evan Brenner. I'm the Digital Content Specialist at Geographic Solutions. So, as many of you might know, if you have tuned into this session before, we have been doing this since December of 2020. We have covered and showcased so many different things, and the Pathway series has gone from everywhere from trends in disability employment to apprenticeships, youth engagement, employment after reentry, and so much more. Today, we are going to be discussing the gig economy and international workforce trends. So I'd like to get right into it. And before we start, I'd like to say that we hope that you will learn something new, take away a best practice, answer a burning question, take something back to your organization or agency. And so we encourage you to please ask questions. This is an overview of who Geographic Solutions is, just in case you don't know, or this is your first time hearing about us. And like I was just saying, if you have a question, use the question pane in the floating GoToWebinar panel. We will answer all questions at the end of our discussion. I would like to go ahead and introduce our panelists. Nimi, starting with you, please go ahead and introduce yourself and just say a few things about yourself for the audience.
Hi everyone, hi from London. I'm Nimi Patel. I'm the Policy Manager for Skills, Talent and Diversity at Tech UK. Tech UK is the UK's leading tech trade association. We focus on all things to do with kind of tech for good policy implementation and lobbying.
Thank you, Nimi. And over to Miguel.
Thank you, Evan. My name is Miguel Peromingo, Spanish name. I live in Berlin in Germany. I was born in Germany. My parents were migrants coming over from Spain, so I have a bi-national background. I'm a consultant for employment policy, and I work with international organizations, governments, but also private providers of employment services. That's my focus for 20 years now, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Miguel. And over to John. John, please say a few things about yourself.
Thank you, Evan. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and appreciate very much the invitation to be with you today. So I'm John Quelch. I'm currently the Dean of the University of Miami Herbert Business School. We serve around about 3,200 undergraduates and 1,200 postgraduates from around the world each year at our school. And thanks for the opportunity.
Excellent. Thank you so much, John. Thank you. And thank you all for being here. So I would like to just go ahead and start off this Pathways with a few questions for John. John, I'd like to start off by saying, can you describe one trend that you would include in curriculum at the University of Miami Herbert Business School that you can directly attribute to gig work?
Well, certainly many of our faculty are very concerned about the future of work, which is obviously very much up in the air as a result of COVID. But it's important to remember that the gig economy and gig work were very much part of the conversation pre-COVID as well. I think it's just that the waters have been further muddied by COVID in terms of what the future of work will look like. It will be no longer a dichotomous question of, are you in the gig economy or are you in an organized place of employment reporting to a boss in a traditional manner, because the latter has now morphed into a multifaceted, segmented group of employee-employer relationships, which might be full-time at work in the office to completely remote, but still working for an organization in the formal economy. So I think that it's important also just in this initial conversation to understand that around about 60 million Americans are involved in gig work. In other words, temporary type work. And that is an enormous number. It's much larger than many people, I think, would guess it to be, because traditionally people have thought of gig work as just meaning driving an Uber, for example. But even in academia, for decades, we have had in our university systems adjunct professors In other words, individuals who are engaged in other activities, but who teach a course once a year or once a semester as an adjunct or part-time professor in a business school. So in many facets of life, we have had a gig economy operating for decades without actually collecting all of these people in one bucket and saying that they are part of the gig economy. But bottom line is the gig economy, in terms of the number of people engaged in it, has grown enormously in the last 10 years as technology has enabled people to be connected online in a much more independent, self-empowering manner than previously was the case.
John, thank you. That was an excellent answer. And I just, I have your book here. It is All Businesses Local. And while I have not read the entirety of it, I do plan to. And I wanted to ask, John, with all business being local, you wrote about how important place is. How important is place to the gig economy?
So let me answer that with perhaps 3 points. Number one, in the era of globalization, where all the conversation was about the global economy, people lost sight of the fact that 95% of all of the transactions that take place in the world between a buyer and a seller every day are still taking place in local environments and typically face-to-face. Now, of course, COVID disrupted that, but we're now back into a more normal state of affairs. So a tremendous amount of interactions are still taking place locally. However, at the same time, it's possible, as we've identified already, for many more transactions and relationships and employer-employee interactions to take place thanks to technology through remote work, through Zoom, etc. And that means that place as an important element in the employer-employee relationship has been disrupted in the last couple of years. But I think a third element of place that is critical here is the place where you or I actually do our work every day. So, it's kind of interesting. I'm looking at the two other speakers. If you look behind me, you can see that this is a very special place for me where I'm speaking to you from. I have, I'm showing my age. I have, a tremendous amount of memorabilia. I have, football helmets from the Miami Hurricanes football team. I have vases from China where I used to live for several years, certificates, etc. So this place is my office at work, but it's a very special, personalized place. And one of the beauties of remote work and gig work is that employees are free to create their own space, their own place. It might be a cubby hole in their apartment. It might be the cockpit of the Uber vehicle that they're driving, but they can personalize it in a way that's very important to them, giving them a sense of ownership of the place where they are working from. So, for some people, and maybe Miguel and Nimi fall into this category, for some people, that's not so important. But for a lot of people, it is important to have the sense of empowerment that comes from working in a place which you can call your own and which you have decorated to your taste.
I just wanted to throw this out here to Miguel and Nimi at this point to just comment on that and just maybe speak about place. As Miguel, you are in Germany, and Nimi, with you being in London, How have you seen place being important? And I know this is kind of a curveball, but how is place important to those two locations and to what John is saying about personalizing your place?
Well, when we talk about the future of work and place-based work in the UK, it's always been about kind of making sure that cities are well adapted for people to be able to live their best life while also working and providing a kind of good hybrid work formats. I think we saw during the pandemic a lot of exodus from the cities back to different kind of localities in the UK, and I think it's the same in the US and in Germany as well. So it's about making sure that everyone has the right infrastructure, devices, and capabilities in order to make their place be the best place for them to work, as John was talking about. Really making sure everyone has the access to those tools.
Yes, and for me, it's not so much about having a place where I have my personal stuff, but it's more about how much I'm able to harmonize my work with my private life. We live part of the year in Spain because a big part of my family is there, and a part of the year we live in Berlin. So basically, all my work is in my laptop. That's all I need to basically open the workplace. And since my clients are anyway all around the world, they are not. I'm not meeting them face to face, or not most of the time. So for me, it's important that I have a setting where I have time to switch back and forth between work and life, so to speak. So that for me, I'm a gig worker. I consider myself a gig worker, and for me, that is a great opportunity to empower myself how to decide about how my work life looks like.
Great. And I can say that, working from home with, during the height of the pandemic, I really tried to carve out that niche at my own house. So I think place was definitely important for that, for everybody who was working at home during that time. Um, John, what lessons, just moving along here a little bit, what lessons can larger companies learn from an increase in flexible and remote work?
So I think that one myth about gig workers is that, and it's a terrible myth, and it's a complete myth, is that they are somehow or other lazy and are just doing part-time work to fill in and just, making ends meet and living from one day to another. The research indicates that gig workers are among the most hardworking and productive members of society. And if you think about it, that makes sense, because to be out on your own as essentially an entrepreneur, working on your own behalf, you're empowered, you're independent, you can set your own pace, and you can work when you feel like working, and not on a 9 to 5 regimen, Monday to Friday. And all of that empowerment, and that's a word Miguel already used, all of that empowerment enables you to be, I think, more creative and more productive. And of course, most gig workers find that they absolutely adore the independence, and they grow in their roles perhaps more quickly than if they were in an organization where they were waiting for someone to develop them to the next level of capability. When you're a gig worker, you only have yourself to congratulate or blame in terms of how far you go and progress in your profession, in your career, etc. So I feel that there's something here for organizations to learn, and it's really about understanding each individual worker or employee and developing an approach to that person that really enhances and empowers and emboldens them to be more successful. I always tell people who work in our organization that one of the greatest satisfactions of being a manager is to develop people to a level of excellence that exceeds their own expectations about what they could achieve. And we have had tremendous success in terms of taking individuals who were potentially, in our eyes, very high performers, but who were in roles in the organization that weren't necessarily that brilliant, not that high visibility, but taking that potential and developing it to a level of excellence that really has exceeded the hopes and dreams of those people. Now, most organizations, I think, fall short in that regard. They don't invest enough in developing the human capital that they have. They worry that if they develop someone or give them more responsibility, they'll simply leave and get another job. So why should I mentor or coach anyone when the gratitude I'm going to receive is that they're going to leave? But I think that that's a very, very short-sighted, narrow-minded view of human nature. And yes, in some cases that will occur, but in most cases, in my experience, developing people to achieve their potential is a tremendous retention device and a much better retention device than any amount of increase in compensation. So yeah, there's a lot to the gig economy is doing a great service to people who continue to work in organizations full time, because it's forcing those organizations to do a better job of understanding how to retain their employees and not have them get frustrated to the point where they migrate into the gig economy, where of course they could still be serving the organization on a part-time or contract basis, but nevertheless they're not part of the core of the corporation or the organization.
Thank you, John. And touching on that, or and maybe directly connected to it, or even indirectly, how can the gig economy help to lower unemployment and create job growth?
Well, just the flexibility associated with the gig economy, gives both employee and employer a range of options that enable more fit to be found in the the labor transaction market. So, inevitably, productivity and employment can improve where there are more options and more flexibility. And I think that, we know in the United States in particular that there are many people, many ambitious people, I would say, including many immigrants into our country who we know work 2 or 3 jobs that are all temporary or part-time or gig jobs in order to make ends meet and create a better life for their families. So the gig economy is a very important source of economic improvement opportunity for people at the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum. And, by the way, that's always been the case in the United States since the first waves of immigration.
Thank you, John. And finally, I have one more question for you, and that is based on some research I did in the Washington Post and a survey by Bankrate. It was shown that gig work can actually provide maybe a temporary solution to inflation. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that may be a little bit exaggerated, because obviously the inflation that we're currently suffering comes from a number of factors. It comes from the supply chain disruptions that have meant that in many cases the right quantity of goods are not available in the right places at the right prices. But in addition to those supply side problems, there's also been the massive surge in demand that caught, I think, some producers, some sellers short as we came out of COVID. So a lot of money chasing too little supply. But then what your question refers to is the third component of inflation, which is commonly known as wage price inflation, where prices go up in the retail marketplace, if you like, and that means that folks need to be paid more and are demanding more in the face of inflation. And when they are paid more, those additional labor costs, of course, have to be recouped by the manufacturers and the producers, and so they're passed on in the form of higher prices. So there's this wage price inflation spiral that can set in. Now, the gig economy, of course, because of the flexibility that it builds into the labor market, actually becomes a help in suppressing inflation during such a period, because if the only employment available was full-time employment with a traditional organization, then there would be a reluctance to add additional full-time jobs in the face of inflation or possible recession. But a non-contractual part-time relationship with someone to fill in while the economy is still doing well. We don't know if the economy is going to go into recession, serious recession next year. So naturally, employers are looking at part-time and gig workers as a way of dealing with the current level of demand, while anticipating that that demand might go down a year from now, and they don't want to be saddled with additional full-time employees. And of course, that would be especially the case in labor markets where letting someone go who's a full-time employee is very difficult and expensive, as in, for example, the Netherlands and other European economies.
Thank you, John. And since we're talking, since John wrapped up with the Netherlands, I thought this might be a good point to throw this question to Nimi and Miguel. And on the same note, in your locales, do you see the gig economy presenting any kind of interesting effects on inflation, or really none at all? And we can, Nimi, if you wouldn't mind just saying a few bits about that.
Sure thing. I don't actually have the answers to that. Miguel, do you want to go first?
Miguel.
I don't have it either. I think there is a huge potential for the gig economy to create jobs. I think there is a huge potential of bringing skills to the fore, skills that are untapped at the moment because they just don't fit into traditional employment drawers. So I think the workforce can be developed more through the gig economy and can bring in the currency it has, which is skills, better than in the current frameworks we have. What effect that has on the inflation, I'm not sure, because I'm not an economist in that sense, but I think it will surely open the potential of putting more people into work.
Fair enough. I thank you all. And I wanted to go ahead and throw this out to the audience at this point. How has the gig economy affected your area or region? We have 4 choices here. Go ahead and take your phone and just give it a little click, and you can actually answer the question by scanning that QR code and putting in your answer. Or you can go to slido.com and type in the number 5001-442 to answer this question. And as you answer the question, we'll be able to see this pop up on the screen, and we can kind of get some real-time results as to how is the gig economy affecting everybody out in the different regions and areas that you're from. And while this survey is being filled out, John, I just wanted to just throw this out there and say, I know that you're the author of over 25 books, and I just thought it would be interesting to know, was there a favorite book to write, or is kind of all of them, pretty much, just the researching and going through the process pretty much like the most fulfilling part?
The All Business is Local book was, I think, published in 2020. I think it was first published in 2012 or thereabouts. And, I wrote that particular book because everything at that time was pro-globalization. All of the books that were coming out were about, the future of the global economy And if you had the word global in the title, you could automatically get on the New York Times bestseller list. If you had the word local in the title, you couldn't even get you couldn't sell your book at a discount on Amazon. But it was very important, in my view, for a book to be written that highlighted, the importance of place still in the psychology of us as human beings. Everybody wants to know where someone is from. That's a very frequently asked question. Where's home? Where are you from? People value a sense of location. It's not just a matter of a sense of identity. It's also a matter of roots in a physical and locational sense. And so this notion that despite all of the digital media and so forth and globalization, that 95+% of transactions were still local and face-to-face, that was a very important thing, I think, to emphasize. And while I think the Zoom equation has had a tremendous positive effect on opening up opportunities for remote work and part-time work and so forth, at the same time, whether it's family, friends, or co-workers, everybody needs to be in a physical space, face-to-face with people every day at some point in their work-life balance equation.
Thank you, John. And please stick around for the end because we will have questions from the audience. So I would now actually quickly, I thought it was very interesting that over about 54% of folks had answered that there has definitely been noticeable impacts from the gig economy in their area. So really interesting stuff. And I would like now to switch over to Nimi. So Nimi, switching gears here a little bit, I saw that there is an upcoming Tech UK webinar, and I wanted to just find out, it says 22.6% of workers have undertaken platform work at some point. Can you describe one international workforce trend that you're following?
So we're really looking at the ways in which gig work is being reflected by governments. So what are governments doing to improve protections for people in the gig economy? In particular, we think that in the UK and in the EU, there's so much more to be done. Tech UK has a number of different large online platforms within our membership. We have over 850 digital businesses who are in a membership, and they're so keen to kind of push forward this idea of protections and making sure that gig workers are well protected. Right now, there's a real lack of clarity for individuals and businesses around the employment status of gig economy workers in the UK. And this lack of clarity really creates a kind of uncertainty around the rights of individuals. So it's all about making sure that, while we talk about the future of work, we take a look at the realistic nature of this kind of work and how people can be supported, especially when it comes to their kind of employment relationship. In the UK, trade unions are increasingly seeing self-employment as an alternative to traditional employment and offering different kinds of benefits that relate to the gig economy. But that have been largely driven by legal cases and court judgments. So, there's an idea and there's a risk of being taken to court or workers being reclassified, which has a chilling effect on innovation. And I think, that comes to the idea of what John was saying, the flexibility of the gig economy workers is crucial, but by providing certainty and clarity to individuals, the gig economy and firms within the gig economy will be enabled to provide additional benefits to their workers. And this may seem like a bit of a strange notion that's coming out because we talk about employment rights all the time, but it really is that large tech businesses want to do more to support their workers, and we're really looking at that kind of across the UK and EU.
Thank you, Nimi. And the skills gap is widening, and there is a call for closing this gap with digital skills. Can you describe a few recommendations that you have for those who are assisting job seekers to build their tech skills?
So when we talk about the skills gap to employers, we're always making sure that they have or they know about the different kinds of pools of talent that exist already in the marketplace. So, how can you support career switches and those returning to work after a career break? So that's one of the really crucial areas we see as a talent pool that's not necessarily dried up in the slightest due to the pandemic. How can you support those returning to work after a career break due to maternity, paternity, caring duties, whatever it may be? There's a lack of returner schemes in the marketplace right now, and we really see that as a disadvantage to companies. By running those schemes, you can really highlight the ways in which we focus in on other areas of talent, such as graduate schemes or apprenticeships, really looking at those fully fledged schemes that help people get back into or get into a workplace. We really think that closing the digital skills gap is not just one area or one age range of work. It requires everyone. And I think one of the great implications of being able to focus on those career switches and those returning to work is that you can really focus on the diversity and inclusion element of those initiatives. So, those kinds of schemes really improve gender representation across senior roles, for instance, definitely undercut workplace perceptions surrounding a woman's right to return to work, for instance, after maternity. So there's real implications when looking at new pools of talent that a company may not have considered. We really think that that's an interesting way to build digital skills within the workplace, and it offers an element of the retraining element. So there's more to be done to support people to retrain and upskill within their own workforce. And yes, returners and career switches schemes are one way to do so, but also the element of building lifelong learning within the workplace is crucial. And that can be done through short modular courses, for instance. They don't necessarily have to be strict training models, although they help kind of quality insurance. Right now in the UK, 82% of job vacancies require digital skills. And those kinds of relevant digital skills upskilling is a crucial step in helping build people's capabilities when they're entering the workforce and as they progress.
I think that's really something to think about, that 82% of jobs required, of those jobs require digital skills. And I just wanted to throw this to Miguel and John and see if you're seeing the same thing with regards to digital skills and upskilling to gain those digital skills in your locales.
Definitely, yes. I mean, it's also, I think we're over the time to divide jobs into digital jobs and non-digital jobs, because all jobs basically will very soon have, and most of them already have, a lot of digital components. So it will basically be a transversal way of delivering your skills, is that you're able to do that digitally as well. And so the digital literacy of people is crucial here to access it. It's if you want to put it provocatively, I think it's digital literacy today is like literacy used to be in the past. You cannot take part in the world of work properly if you are not able to express yourself in a digital way or to deliver your skills digitally.
Thanks, Miguel. I love that. And John, with developing curriculum, has digital skills and skills building become a large part of that?
Absolutely, in a couple of ways. So, first of all, digital transformation is a very key element in most companies' agendas these days. And in our non-degree executive education business, where we supply leadership development seminars and interventions for major corporations internationally, we find that digital transformation, along with change management and leadership development, those are the three topics that are most front and central when we talk to CEOs about what we need to deliver to help them be better and more successful and more profitable. And then I would say at the granular level, individual students, we have a business technology major, which is a little bit unusual. Most schools would have a finance major, a marketing major, accounting major, etc. We have a business technology major. We've invested a lot of money in additional faculty in that territory, and it's paying off handsomely. We have a very substantial number of students who are majoring in business technology. In addition, we have Python, R, and other, basic important tools, in addition to obviously Excel, spreadsheet management, etc. These kind of technical skills are very important for employers when they're recruiting out of undergraduate programs or indeed out of our master's programs. They, as Miguel said, they want to see digital literacy. It's table stakes. It's not icing on the cake. You just have to have it as a starting point now to be recruited into any organization.
Thank you, John, and thank you to all of our panelists. Nimi, going back to some of the effects on the UK side with the COVID-19 pandemic, are there still lingering effects in the UK on employment, and how do you see those effects translating into jobs potential for the gig economy and more?
Definitely. So I really think that the pandemic has changed our approach to work and learning. We've seen new working practices and teaching models being adopted across the UK. So not just focusing on hybrid work, but flexible work, job sharing, ways that in which companies can really support people to flourish at work. I think on the skills element side of what's been happening in the pandemic, we're really seeing widening discrepancies in those that have digital skills and those that don't, and definitely in the varying levels of those that have digital skills. So we saw how across the world digital inclusion was so important. So those are the basic level digital skills, what we call essential digital skills. Can a person turn on their laptop? Can a person access email? Can they print a document, for instance? But for what is crucial for us is the 82% of job vacancies now requiring digital skills, and they require digital skills for the modern workplace. And those are skills that can you use the CRM, for instance? Can you use Excel, as John mentioned, effectively to be able to do your job in a way in which you automate or sort of digitalize the more meaningless tasks in your work, so that you can focus in on the work that is more important to you. And we're seeing that across the UK and the marketplace in terms of how jobs are presented and what more we need to do to be able to skill people. And this focuses in on kind of the longer and wider effects of automation, right? We're looking at ways in which we can automate different parts of different tasks. And I think by something like 2022, people are expecting to automate sort of 58% of their total tasks in certain IT areas that are performed by machines and algorithms. That's from the World Economic Forum, a Future of Jobs report, so take a look. And in those areas, of course, where people are very scared that the robots may come and take their jobs, but that's not the message that we're looking to share. It's more about the fact that these tasks that are meaningless or menial will be automated, and people can focus in on the things that make them happy. But also another effect of this is that people will have no choice but to reskill or perform new tasks in this future workplace. So that's become really apparent, the kind of stark differences between those that have the digital skills needed to thrive in the digital economy and those that don't. For us, it's about making sure everyone has those skills needed for the modern workplace. Every day in the tech sector, it changes. There's more and more focus on higher level technologies as well. So focusing in on AI, quantum computing, things to do with semiconductors, all really interesting areas in the UK. And I'm sure across the globe, but these are stuff that we need to prepare people to have the skills to thrive. I mean, the tech sector creates thousands and thousands of jobs every day. I think the vacancies in the UK were something under 870,000 between Jan of this year and May of this year. And that accounts for 14% of all job opportunities in the UK in terms of the tech sector. So there's so much happening in this space. How can we equip people with the skills they need is a really tough conversation that companies need to be having with themselves, and really looking at their training strategies as well.
Thank you, Nimi. And I'll combine my next two questions into kind of one, because I think they're similar in nature. But with the projection that there is going to be 43 million folks working on digital platforms by 2025, how can employers use this information to harness the gig economy? And the second part of this question is, should employers who offer traditional employment styles still be analyzing the gig economy for trends?
Yes, I mean, I think the gig economy and gig economy work is really powering innovation across sectors, right? It's not just focusing on the tech sector, but looking at courier transport, delivery services, but software development. So it all kind of, meshes together and is really important for all of the work that people do. People are looking at gig work as a flexible alternative to traditional employment, and that continues to enable them to work as long as they want to. But what is important for us is those protections to make sure that those people are protected and have all the kind of legal basis for their work. I think it's the kind of clarity and policy certainty is needed for people, and we should really push and publish non-statutory guidance on how employment status and definitions work in practice for those gig economy workers. I think gig work is defined by its flexibility, as John has mentioned, and we really need to raise the standards in the gig economy so that we can review things around metrics around pay and hours and how that affects, companies' gender pay gaps and ethnicity pay gaps, to make sure that, we're not having the same conversations in a few years' time about the gig work, and we've made sure not to fall short of certain fallacies in employment.
Evan, if I could just follow on from that.
Of course. Yes.
One thing I think is very important here is healthcare benefits, which have not been mentioned. But as we know in European economies with national health services, gig workers have the ability to access healthcare in the same way as workers who are in formal organizations. In the United States, that's not the case. And therefore, there's quite a burden on gig workers in the US who don't have easy access to affordable health care. And that's perhaps constraining gig work more than it should. But I think one thing that's come clear in the last 3 years is that employers have been, in my mind, somewhat foolishly cutting back or attempting to cut back in the US on the healthcare benefits that they're providing to their full-time employees. And if you constrain those or seek to limit them to save costs, then you're actually making the gig work, in fact, more attractive, relatively speaking, because the differentiation that you've been able to use to sustain people continuing to work for you, you're eroding that by cutting back on the amount of benefits that you're giving in the healthcare sector. And one thing I would say in addition is that when COVID hit, a lot of companies shed a lot of employees. To some extent, that was not entirely without rationale, because no one knew how long COVID was going to last, how serious it was going to be. From a shareholder point of view, it was obviously relevant to those companies to cut their costs. But many of those employees were long-serving employees who I think were amazed, disappointed that they were treated so badly by the companies that they had worked for maybe 10, 20, 30 years. And those workers have not, in many cases, come back into the formal economy because they became so disenchanted with the concept of working for anyone if they were treated that poorly after so many years of service. So that's one reason why in the US, companies are having a lot of trouble hiring workers into full-time employment, because in many cases, those workers were let go unceremoniously when tough times 2.5 years ago called for that action. So I think these factors are also playing in favor of the gig economy as well.
John, I've just got a quick question for you. In the UK, often people like to conflate low-paid work and the gig economy. Just wondering, does that happen to you across the US and Miguel in Germany and in the EU? I really think it's unhelpful to associate any discussion about work in the gig economy with low-paid work, but really keen to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so I mean, I would go back to my first comment and say that we have for decades in higher education had adjunct professors who are, qualified folks who do a great job of teaching our students, who teach a single course or teach a couple of courses a year. They are not and never have been on the full-time payroll. They are paid on a per task basis for completing one course. And in many service sectors in the US economy, professional service sectors, you've had a long tradition of consultants, part-time, self-employed consultants who have been running their one-man small business or one-woman small businesses, and that's been going on for 30, 40, 50 years in the United States. So I don't actually think that that conflation that may exist in the UK or Europe, I don't think that conflation actually is evident here.
Well, in the European Union, there's, of course, a strong discussion in case of looking at whether wages are fair, whether jobs in the gig economy are not too low paid. And while I think it's not conducive to reduce it to this discussion, because the gig economy is so much more, and I think it doesn't pay service to the underlying positive trends in the world of work that the gig economy represents. I think what is fair is to have a discussion about the working conditions in the gig economy, which can be informal, can be unfair, it can bring aspects of health and safety, can bring aspects of what is actually a worker, and can bring aspects of the employer that is giving out gigs, not committing fairly to the gig workers. So I think it's a larger discussion of whether the gig economy is really centering on the workers and paying them their fair share and allowing fair working conditions.
Thank you all. And I just, decided I would kind of go to our Slido poll, which is a word cloud. And I see that many of you have gone ahead and scanned, and thank you so much for doing that. But if you don't know, just take your phone and go ahead and do that QR code on your screen. But it looks like flexibility is definitely a huge skill that everybody, a lot of folks have named out of these, and I love some of these, like silver lining seeker and strategic thinker. I think there's ability to think outside is a great one too. So while you're filling out that poll or joining at slido.com, I will just move along. And Miguel, I just have a few questions for you before we get into our Q&A. And one thing that I thought to ask was, what is one trend we can take away from youth employment trends? Do you see a rise in younger generations gravitating towards gig work and flexible work?
I think the gig economy is a good sign that the entire world of work has been moving for a couple of years already into a more human-centered way of delivering work. So it's shifting power from the employer to the worker. People want to decide more on the way how they work. They want to bring in their skills more, and young people are naturally maybe more able to do that because of their flexibility, because of the mindset of entering the world of work and wanting to shape it in a way that it works for them and where they can bring in their skills. So I think platform work, for example, on many levels is a good framework to allow young people to have a positive impact more than contracts, more than classical employment, to turn tasks into accomplishments, to work in teams digitally, which I think is an enormous potential of the gig economy, to network on a digital level. And also, I think very interesting in the gig economy is the potential of self-learning, that as you go along with gigs, you learn a lot. a lot more than if you're doing if you're in a procedural setting in a kind of long-term employment. So all these things are very positive. And in the past decade, basically, the gig economy has evolved from a rather marginal form of work to something that the wider public is interested in. A lot of people work in the gig economy. I think 30% of young people worldwide work in the gig economy, at least in parts, because the good thing about it is also you can combine it with employment. You don't have to work either in the gig economy or outside of it. So, and it's a business form that is embraced by many companies, not only small startups, but also, as you know, Fortune 500 companies work on platforms. Especially SMEs, I think, have during the corona pandemic also basically saved their businesses through gigs, which they would otherwise not have been able to do. So I think that's great, especially for young people. But it is also vulnerable. It's a vulnerable form of work, and young people are vulnerable from the outset. I don't believe in this talk of lost generation and that young people are labeled as a vulnerable group from the beginning. But it is true that a young person would have, because of the lack of experience, naturally struggle more to enter the job market or to strive in the job market than someone who is already experienced in the job market. So, and with the coronavirus, for example, it was obvious that in the gig economy, half of people lost their jobs from the gigs they had, and I think a quarter would say even now that they're underemployed. So it brings aspects of unemployment, underemployment, and other forms of informality that are an issue in the employment world, and in the gig economy can be amplified. So I think it's good to have a look at that. And look at advantages, disadvantages of what it is, and find also frameworks for young people to be protected, workers in general be protected, but also to allow it enough room for young people to thrive. While I was looking at this cloud, I was thinking that the other day I read a report by the OECD that was forecasting the 3 main skills that will be needed in 2030. And it was the ability to identify and to create value by yourself, not someone telling you what to do, but creating yourself, solving conflicts, and the ability to take responsibility and basically move in that responsibility. So that sounds abstract, but I think that's the underlying power also of the gig economy that allows it to be human-centered.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Miguel. Just quickly touching on this, and I know we've talked a lot about skills and the digital skills gap, but how do we improve skills training to fill in the digital skills gap? And in your opinion, do these concepts apply to flexible work?
I think Nimi and John said already a couple of things about it. Just as a kind of brief answer, I think it's good to look at this, the whole skilling opportunities as a life cycle approach, not as a job entry. I'm getting out of university or getting out of education as a young person. I'm being skilled, then I start doing a job, and then I don't need to be skilled anymore or upskilled anymore. So I think if all the actors on the labor market, employers, workers, education institutes, anybody involved in the labor market understands that you need a life cycle approach of learning skills and upskilling yourself, but also having the opportunity to do so throughout your whole career. I think that would help a lot to find and tap more into potential of skills that they are not there because you have a certain job. You don't use that particular set of skills that you have because nobody's asking for them. So we need to find ways of having people put their skills to work also if they're older. And I think the gig economy is a great way of doing that. And then also to have to portion to be more granular in looking at skills, not so much at qualifications but at skills, and finding ways of profile those skills, of having job vacancies around those skills, and of valuing skills rather than qualifications. if that makes sense. And altogether, the human-centered approach that I talked about, bringing this to different actors on the labor market, especially also employers, to stop the perception that that skills or workforce is an HR cost factor, but it's rather a potential to grow the company also, and to grow the potential of earning money with the company. The better, the more skills you have, and the better they are, the more potential you have to thrive in the market.
Thank you, Miguel. And I know we're coming up on time here, and I want to be cognizant of that for everybody who is attending. And so, Miguel, I'm going to ask one more question, and then I do have a few questions we'll go through from the audience. In 2018, you wrote about rethinking employment services for the digital era. How does the gig economy play into this discussion and, you know, into employment services, job matching, and skills development?
Yes, I mean, employment services represent the very often, if they're public, especially, they represent the government, the state. So I think it's very important to bring up and to have a serious discussion about the informality of the gig economy, and find a way of protect workers and making the work conditions in a way that they are good for the employers, but that they're also good for the workers. So, and I think employment services can have a role of moderating this and helping to improve that. Then I think employment services are a good position, because they often get a lot of information of skills of job seekers, and also vacancies, to have good software in place, to be granular enough about profiling the skills, about matching the skills with the right vacancies, and also see what is the potential of upskilling workers to be able to take a particular job. This applies to employment services in general. As for the gig economy in particular, I think the staff of employment services needs to be better trained in understanding the gig economy, and maybe reducing the prejudice that it's informal work only, and that it's only people on bikes that don't have health insurance, but that it's so much more, and that it's basically the way that the labor market will work in the future, because people want to decide about what type of jobs they take and how that fits to their skills. So I think the mindset of staff in employment services needs to change in that, and then it's also good to train them a little bit into using platforms and formulating vacancies in a way that they can go on a platform, and helping the employers go through the paperwork if they want to make their gigs, the gigs they publish, fairer and better paid.
Thank you, Miguel. And I'm going to go to audience questions. We did have a few other questions that we were going to cover, but let's go to the audience round. So quickly here, and I just, you know, to be respectful of time, just a short answer from each will be great. Janet says that that they work with those returning to work from longer periods of incarceration. They train folks in manufacturing skills, but they have severely limited access to computers and none to phones. She, you know, wants to know how to, you know, get the credentials that traditional employers view as valuable, despite being highly skilled and experienced. Like, what would you recommend for that population, for those who are coming out of incarceration? Is the gig economy something that they can get into? And that would be the question.
Sorry if I go ahead, John.
Yeah, so I think this is a fantastic question. I had never actually thought of this before hearing this question. The concept that incarcerated folks can't get digital skills training because they would have access to technical equipment and telephonic equipment and so forth. You know, I really think that if that is a barrier, that it really is something that the prison services would be sensibly alerted to. I think companies like Amazon and other companies that provide certifications in the digital space should also be alert to this particular opportunity to train people who could be extremely helpful to them. In fact, you know, when you start thinking about it, is there any particular reason why someone who's incarcerated should not be capable of earning money in the gig economy from prison? And, you know, under appropriate supervision, you know, that skills training and that economic contribution would be very valuable to society when that person is reintegrated into society. So this is a really wonderful question, and I really appreciate the person who put it forward.
Just to quickly add on, I think that employment services, since you asked me that in the question before, I think would be a great relay here. I think, and in fact, in Europe, in a couple of countries, they're doing just that. They're going into prisons to help inmates to connect to the labor market. And I think the gig economy is a good platform for that. So, but I think it's good to have an agent in between that helps formulate what are the skills, what would be the possibilities, and to kind of supervise the whole procedure.
I think we might also just very briefly, Evan, mention people with physical and other challenges who may have difficulty getting to a workplace in a traditional sense, but for whom the gig economy has opened up a range of opportunities that previously were not open to them. And I'm sure Nimi is familiar with Remploy in the United Kingdom, which is a wonderful organization of this nature. So that's another area where another constituency of stakeholders in the employment market for whom the gig economy is opening up a lot of possibilities.
Thank you all. And Mandy, you will have to forgive me. I think I blended yours and Janet's question together, but I hope that that was an adequate response. And we will, of course, try to follow up with these questions afterwards when this is over. We have run out of time. We are at 12:01 p.m. I just wanted to quickly make a plug for our conference that is coming up in October. It's fast approaching. If you haven't made plans yet, please join us on Clearwater Beach, October 3rd through 6th. John, Miguel, Nimi, thank you so much for spending an hour with us today. And helping me develop this presentation over the last couple of months. I really appreciate it. And I just wanted to say thank you to the audience, everybody who tuned in. Have a great day. And thank you so much for spending some time with us today.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks all.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.